The tensions between Sunnis and Shiites has complicated the landscape in several countries in the Middle East and Africa that the U.S. is either actively engaged in or concerned about in the so-called war on terror. Over the years, that war has shifted from the hunt for specific terrorists to a wide-reaching fight against extremism. I spoke with Akbar Ahmed, author of The Thistle and the Drone, How America's War on Terror Became a Global War on Tribal Islam, about that shift and how it's affected both the U.S. and the Muslim world.
I think things have shifted mainly because this war has extended over a decade now. In fact, Afghanistan is America's longest war in history. And as you know, once wars begin to drag on, they really become something else from what was planned or what was intended to start with. More people get involved, more leaders get involved as old leaders are removed or killed or captured. And that's where we are today. So what began with one thing is now ended up with another thing. And today the war on terror, in a sense, has become a global war. You have West Africa, North Africa, East Africa, the Middle East, Central Asia, South Asia, large parts of the world involved. So therefore we have to step back and begin to analyze this war and say, how can we bring peace and stability to these peoples so that nations are safe, peoples are safe, and we don't have this kind of widespread violence that you're seeing.
So when you went into this, I'm sure you went in with some ideas of how things would go. You're looking at the research. Anything that just jumped right out at you and said, wow, I'm shifting the way I even think about this?
Well, I'd been in the field as the administrator in charge of large parts of Balochistan and in the frontier province, the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province of Pakistan, on the border of Afghanistan. So I had some idea of tribal peoples, tribal customs, tribal histories, traditions. And I really feel that what jumps at you is how the lack of knowledge of local peoples, local cultures makes so much of a difference.
So how do you affect change when you're up against that?
Well, I think the first thing we start doing is that armies, officers, administrators representing central government, when they come out to these tribal areas, peripheral areas, marginal areas, they need to have some understanding of local custom and local culture. And that helps them a great deal. It helps local people, but helps them also. It helps them to build bridges, to be more effective, and to begin to interact with the community and take the community along with them. Simple things like some sense of dignity, some sense of honor. Sooner or later, when you start crushing people, you have a reaction. And that is why the notion of the thistle and the drone. The drone is the ultimate killing machine of globalization. The thistle represents a tribe, a tribal people, a traditional people. The thistle is a prickly plant, but it also represents a flower which has a sense of pride, of independence, of standing up.
What about these tribal peoples? You have, you know, this starts out as a hunt to get Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda ingratiates itself or finds a way into these communities, and suddenly the communities themselves become the targets, whether intended or unintended, and also the victims.
Exactly. That's a very important point, because you start off by wanting to get a dozen or 2 dozen or 3 dozen people. But in the end, you may involve an entire tribe or an entire community, which may involve a couple of million people. So suddenly, from having 3 dozen people who are your enemies, you end up by having 3 million people who are your enemies. So instead of closing that chapter in the war on terror, you open up other chapters. And that's what we are seeing. So again, what began with the pursuit of a few Al-Qaeda has ended up now literally with a global hunt for the suspected terrorists.
I wanted to throw this quote out there because there's been a lot of praise for your book. The former Archbishop of Canterbury said this should be compulsory reading for Western governments. If President Obama doesn't have time to read your book, or Prime Minister Cameron is just too busy, but they were to get you on a conference call, what would be the themes that you would hit to try and convey to them the importance of perhaps shifting how they do things?
Well, I have a whole chapter on this. My last chapter is on precisely this, trying to answer what should Western governments be doing, what should governments host governments where you have these problems, like Pakistan, like Afghanistan, what they should be doing, and what tribal leaders should be doing. Remember, there are 3 points in this triangle, and each point is in play. And very often there's limited understanding between these 3 points. And to make it more complicated, there is a complete air of obfuscation and disinformation and darkness over the whole enterprise. So it becomes even foggier than normal wars are.
Akbar Ahmed, thank you so much for stopping by and talking to us.
Thank you.